We got a special guest for you in a moment here, but I just want to preface it by telling you this little story of Justin Trudeau. I talked a moment ago about doing that, the Harper interview around the Labor Day weekend. Well, I did a Trudeau interview at the same time. And after the interview was over and we were taking what we call cutaways, different shots that you need in terms of the edit and the production of the interview, he told me he went through his little riff about being underestimated throughout his life in politics. That he was underestimated when he ran for the by-election, first of all, for a win in Papineau. Then he was underestimated, he said, in that fight, remember, against the Conservative senator, and he ended up the boxing match for charity, which he won. That he was underestimated when he ran for leadership of the party, and that he would be underestimated again during this campaign. He said he was always underestimated, but he always had confidence that he could win. And in fact, in every one of those circumstances, Justin Trudeau won. Now, I tell you that story for another reason, because in the history of our country, there's only one person who has ever defeated a Trudeau. And that's our next guest. Joins us tonight from London, England, where former Prime Minister Joe Clark sits by, having defeated Pierre Trudeau in 1979, didn't go so well the next year in 1980, but nevertheless has that record for him. I know it's very early in the morning, it's tomorrow morning in London, but you had a chance to watch Justin Trudeau there. I'm not sure whether you ever thought you would see that day. I mean, you knew the Trudeaus, you obviously knew his father, you saw Justin growing up, at the same time your daughter Catherine was growing up. It must have been a strange feeling for you watching that tonight.
Well, it's been a strange feeling since Justin ran for the leadership and won it. But I have to say his performance in the campaign has been really extraordinary. Not simply was it effective, but it demonstrated who he was. And I did know the family, and they were both, the father clearly has proven his essence and strength, and I think that at least so far, Justin Trudeau, the new Prime Minister-elect, has done the same thing. What is clear is that they're very different people, but one of the things that they have in common is that they reflected their age. They reflected the generation that they were elected to lead. And both of them, as Justin Trudeau indicated tonight, were very much optimists. I think probably the son a little more enthusiastically than the father. I found it striking that he would talk about Laurier's sunny ways, because it seems to me that this campaign at the end came down to quite clearly a choice of styles. And he is an optimist. He's establishing a sunny style, a style of hope. And he is following a period of time when there was a sense of division and of lack of momentum in the country. Now, it's going to be a real challenge for him to maintain that idea of inclusiveness going forward. But I think it's genuine, and I think he's very well begun.
You know, there was something he said in that speech that reminded me of the eulogy he gave his father. He talked tonight about respect for your opponents. And I don't think anybody who would have seen that eulogy those few years ago for his father would forget that moment. He talked about being taken in the parliamentary restaurant after making a few cracks about you, young Justin, led over by his father, Pierre Trudeau, to meet you and under the instruction saying, you always respect your opponent. You never make fun of your opponent. It was interesting to hear him, in some ways, remark back to that same kind of lesson that he'd heard from his father tonight.
And that is going to be a real challenge going forward. It always is. He has reached out to everyone. He has achieved the support of a lot of people who would not normally support his party, might not have supported them in previous times. He's set himself the goal, as he has to, of governing for everyone. Being a prime minister can be confining. Leading a party, leading a government, even a majority government, can be confining. And he's going to have to ensure that he is true to that promise. You know, Peter, some of us who have a long experience with Liberal governments harbor a suspicion that they are not always as open as they seem. And I think that one of the challenges that Justin Trudeau faced and overcame in this campaign was that he earned confidence, that he was quite genuinely a person who trusted and respected others. I think that's an essential quality in the country and the world that we're living in now, a time when problems are acute and when suspicions are higher than they had been in previous times. He's going to need that. He's going to need help, but he's going to have to be very true to himself. And on the basis of what I've seen in the last couple of months in the campaign, I'm reasonably confident he'll do that.
The Right Honourable Joe Clark joining us from London, England tonight. We appreciate very much your time, Mr. Clark, getting up early as I know you did, but I guess you probably wanted to watch that little bit of history unfold this evening as well.
I certainly did. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, sir. Joe Clark joining us from London. I want to show you, we're going to go to the insiders in just a second. I want to show you this cartoon that's come out in the last couple of hours. Bruce McKinnon, the great cartoonist in Halifax for the Chronicle Herald. Justin Trudeau doing the bat flip with Stephen Harper based on tonight's results. And that's a classic. That one will go down and be remembered. That's in tomorrow's Chronicle Herald. We love to scoop the papers on their own stuff. All right, let's bring in the insiders. They're down in the voters' studio, and they've been very patient throughout tonight, as has everybody, as we watch what's been going on. We're heading into a period of transition, I guess, in terms of, where am I looking? There we are. In terms of what happens now as governments change. You've all seen some of that kind of action before, whether it's from opposition to government or from third-party status to opposition. Things have to happen in spite of what happened this evening and the emotions that this kind of evening produces, but they have to happen in a hurry, especially when you're moving into government. What's that process like? David, can you give us an idea?
Well, I think that the officials at the Privy Council office in Ottawa will have been giving careful study to the Liberal platform and coming up with ideas as to how that platform can be implemented. They will be meeting with Mr. Trudeau's team virtually immediately, and there will be extensive and intensive meetings over the next week to 10 days, talking about everything from how to restructure the machinery of government to the ordering of policies. And of course, while all that's going on, the new Prime Minister has to decide what kind of cabinet to put together and how that cabinet will be shaped and formed. And in this regard, I just want to say one thing that's kind of got lost in the shuffle of all this. One of the many great things that Mr. Trudeau and his team did was recruit a truly exceptional group of candidates across Canada, a once-in-a-generation influx of talent. So they've got an embarrassment of riches in terms of a cabinet, and I fully expect they'll put together one of the most talented cabinets we've seen in the country.
And one of the challenges he will have in doing that is he's talked about having, you know, as almost all governments do when they come in, we're not going to have a large cabinet, we're going to have a smaller cabinet than the last the last party did. We're also going to reflect diversity and have an even gender balance. But he's got a lot to choose from, so these are going to be extremely difficult decisions. Jamie, your thoughts on the emotions of tonight and the challenges of transition?
Well, first of all, you know, new leaders are lucky. We have very sophisticated public service when it comes to transitions. They're good at it. They've been preparing for over a year. But you're right, there's lots of decisions to be made. And every leader soon finds out he disappoints more people than he makes friends when she or he makes their new cabinet. And Mr. Trudeau is going to find that out when he's got a lot of terrific choices and some restrictions, geography, gender, and what others. But there's just an awful lot to do when you take over a G7 government. And of course, remember, people are taking over this government and they're exhausted. They've been on the longest campaign in memory, and they've now, without getting any kind of break at all, they've got to assume some really important responsibilities starting first thing tomorrow morning.
The winners are never as tired as the losers.
At least not briefly. And then, of course, the opposition parties have a transition of a different kind.
All right, Kathleen?
Yeah, we just pick up on what JB was just saying there, that there's different kinds of transition depending on where the parties are, right? So, and Democrats obviously will be having to let go and restructure staff, and that's really sad because it's not just the numbers on a screen. These are real people who will likely will have to lose their jobs in the coming days. So my heart goes out to them, friends and colleagues. That said, I think the one thing I would mention that hasn't been said on the show tonight, Peter, you know, I was hearing from friends in Ottawa about people cracking champagne and even fireworks going off in some areas of Ottawa tonight in celebration of the Heave Steve event that happened tonight. And I think that New Democrats, despite the disappointing results tonight, can take some amount of pride in the fact that New Democrats did hold Mr. Harper to account in Parliament and help to kind of in some way illuminate the disastrous record that the Conservatives have had in government and just the destruction that they've wreaked on many of our services, on our veterans, on our environmental laws in this country. And hopefully there's some solace in that tonight.
All right. Well, I'm sure some New Democrats will take solace in that. Kathleen Monk, David Hurley, Jamie Watt, thanks for your patience tonight. Long night, but we were better informed by having the opportunity to hear your thoughts and analysis on a variety of different things that happened throughout the evening. The Insiders, and they'll be back with us, of course, during the National over the weeks ahead. Okay, let's look at the big numbers and then get some final thoughts from everybody before we hand things over to Ian Hannah-Mansing, who's got an all-nighter planned for us. So we're looking forward to that. It'll even be longer than Justin Trudeau's speech, Andrew. All right, the Liberals at 184, leading or elected, 102 Conservatives, 41 NDP, 10 Bloc, and 1 Green. Let's go quickly around the table. Rosie, your thoughts on what we've witnessed tonight. I mean, nobody has been closer to the campaign than you, doing it every day on Power and Politics.
Well, it's not where we thought we would end up at any point, certainly at the beginning, and even at the middle. I'm not sure we really had a sense that this was coming until maybe a week ago. We started to feel some sort of magic thing happening on the ground. And I think it's worth pointing out to people now that the changes are going to be quite phenomenal going forward. Let's talk about just some of the immediate things. Cabinet meetings. Mm-hmm. We are going to attend and know when cabinet meetings are happening again. I have never experienced that as a journalist in Ottawa. We're going to be able to ask questions of cabinet ministers as they come out. This is something the Liberal...
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
That's what they say they're going to do.
I'm going to buy it for a day, okay? I'm going to buy it for a day.
Okay.
Give it to me for the day. That's what they say they're going to do. And I think we're going to, you know, they say they're going to have first ministers meetings again. Again, give me 24 hours, Chantal. This is what they say. Maybe it'll happen. I think there's going to be a lot of shifting for things, and I think that the story gets exciting in the next 24 hours.
Diana.
I thought it was interesting how, as the night started, Newfoundland did, in fact, foretell much of the story. The Liberals won every riding in Newfoundland and Labrador at the expense of the NDP, and we saw that play out in other places.
We're not hearing you.
We're not hearing me. No,
Is your
no.
mic working or not?
I think so. Are you hearing me now? No. See, now I can hear myself.
They're hearing you. Okay.
What I was saying is that I thought it was interesting. The night started in Newfoundland, and it foretold the story for the rest of the country. It was the Liberal strength at the expense of everything else. They won every riding in Newfoundland and Labrador at the expense of the NDP. We saw that play out, certainly in Ontario. Interesting in Ottawa, for instance. The Conservatives hold one seat after tonight. Pierre Poilievre goes back. The man who was ushering in the democratic reform, ironically finds himself living it out in a very different way. Two other thoughts I would add, though, quickly.
Make them quick, because...
184 for the Liberals. What was it, 34 before tonight?
Yeah,
150 neophytes going to Ottawa. Yes, they have political experience municipally or provincially, but it's not the same sandbox.
Wendy, and we only have a couple of seconds, sorry.
Well, a very, very long campaign, and I think that really helped Justin Trudeau. It was really only about halfway, 2/3 of the way through, that he started to pick up all of that support in Quebec among Francophones. In the middle, they were hoping for 25 seats. At the end, they said, we're secretly hoping for 40. Nobody believed them. That's what they ended up getting. Some of that was the NICAB issue, played so heavily by the Bloc and the Conservatives. It hurt Tom Mulcair. It did not hurt Justin Trudeau. So this was a referendum, not on sovereignty for once in Quebec. It was on Stephen Harper. Quebecers chose him to lead them out of that. And you said that his speech was somewhat like Obama's. To me, it also had echoes of Jack Layton, of hope over fear, and he's the one who picked up that mantle or those seats.
All right, quickly with the Adichie panel, and I'm afraid it has to be quick. Andrew, you start.
Oh, and then you start with Andrew, so good
I'll
night.
keep it short.
You watch. He's going to be.
How do you think I feel?
We don't call him 30-second coin for nothing.
I thought we were in an era of good feelings now.
Okay, that's enough.
The column you didn't write.
Right message, right campaign, right strategy. But ultimately, this was Justin Trudeau's victory. I think we're discovering he's a bit more of his father's son than perhaps we'd understood in the past. Bob Ray talked about the discipline. I was struck by something that Bruce said about how it was good for them that he started in third. And I think people construct politics, they construct along storylines. And there was a storyline here of Prince Hal kind of being tested and tempered and having to show that he was actually his own man and could tough it out. And that's what he did in the course of this very long campaign.
All right, Chantal, just 30 seconds.
30 seconds, I'll give you an example of what it means to see seats change, even if things get worse. The Bloc Québécois tonight more than doubled its seat count, but it actually got less votes and less share of the popular vote than it did when it was almost crushed. So this is what a four-way split does, and it gives the Liberals 40-plus seats, which is all good for them.
Of course, this is all going to change when we move to a new system of representation that Prime Minister-elect has promised, right? Bruce, your final thought.
There was a book written about the Harper era, I guess, or at the beginning of the Harper era, called The Big Shift, and it suggested that Canada had undergone a fundamental value shift. I think this election, to me anyway, has proven that when it comes to things like compassion and tolerance, we're still the country that we were before Mr. Harper. I do think there has been an important shift, though, and if I think about what's really unique about Mr. Trudeau, it's probably that he's the least partisan prime minister that we have had. Probably Paul Martin was not that partisan, but we had years of Jean Chrétien, and we had years of Mr. Harper, both of whom were highly partisan people. I don't think Justin Trudeau thinks that way. I don't think he approaches politics that way. It'll be interesting to see how well that works.
Yeah, we will. It will be interesting to see because, you know, we've all been disappointed at times in the past by things that were promised going into a period of government at different levels of government. And we'll wait and see what happens this time around. A great start, though, for Justin Trudeau. Those numbers prove it. A majority Liberal government and the new 23rd Prime Minister of Canada. Thank Adichie, thank the insiders, Wendy, Diana, Rosie. Terrific work in the field by our reporters, Hannah and Susan, and Catherine Cullen, who was in Calgary. And thank you for watching. This has been your day. We've been saying that throughout this day. This is the decision you made about the future shape of this country. I'm Peter Mansbridge. Thanks for watching tonight. There'll be lots of stories tomorrow, and follow up now with Ian Hanomansi.
Canadians have spoken. The results are in.
The Liberal government of Justin Trudeau will be a majority government tonight.
Now, with a Liberal majority government, what happens next and what it means for you. Stay with CBC News for continuing coverage. Canada Votes 2015.
I'm Ian Hannamansing. We're live in Toronto. A stunning victory for the Liberals. Justin Trudeau will be Prime Minister Trudeau, leading a majority government. And as the Liberals celebrate becoming the first party in Canada to go from third place to government, the Conservatives will soon be choosing a new leader. After nearly a decade in power, Stephen Harper will be stepping down. We have reporters standing by across Western Canada. Rob Brown is in Calgary, Tim Trinacity in Edmonton, Chris Brown in downtown Vancouver, Andrew Chang in Surrey, British Columbia, Duncan McHugh is on Vancouver Island, and Susanna De Silva is in our Vancouver newsroom. I want to show you the lay of the land. We're in the lower atrium of the Broadcast Centre in Toronto. Just to my right in the distance behind our analyst is the set that Peter Mansbridge just ended the special with, and they're just dismantling that after putting together the live coverage of this historic election. We're going to talk to David Mitchell and Erin Tolley in just a moment. Our show begins now.
My friends, we beat fear with hope. We beat cynicism with hard work. We beat negative, divisive politics with a positive vision that brings Canadians together.
Well, a stirring speech by Justin Trudeau. Let's look at the numbers that led to that speech, the results of the election tonight. And we'll begin with, as you can see on the board coming up here, the party standings. The Liberals, at one point, people talked about a possible Liberal lead, then a Liberal minority government, and as you see, by the end of the counting, a Liberal majority government. Let's also look at vote share in the country tonight. And the Liberals with, in first place, 38.5% of the vote. There's going to be a lot of talk this evening and for the next few days about how that translates into such a solid majority government. That's just one of the discussion points we'll have over the next couple of hours here. So, good time to introduce our analyst. Erin Tolley is a political science professor at the University of Toronto, and David Mitchell, a familiar face to those of you on CBC, especially those of you who have watched these after the vote specials, a historian and political writer. And Erin, first impressions, let me start with you. What do you think of what you saw tonight?
I mean, certainly I don't think many people saw this coming. Definitely a surprising result and quite a historic a victory for Justin Trudeau. It says to me that Canadians were willing to take a bit of a risk. I mean, Mr. Trudeau had been painted as this sort of, risky choice who wasn't ready, and Canadians thought he was ready. And I think that his opponents perhaps underestimated him.
David?
You know, the polls were approximately correct, Ian. Isn't it interesting, after all the debate about the science and art of public opinion research, the polls had it approximately right on. We have the second youngest premier in Canadian history. Only Joe Clark was younger when he was elected Prime Minister in 1979. And a remarkable personal triumph for Justin Trudeau and the Liberal team.
As you were watching the Prime Minister-designate, Erin, Justin Trudeau give his speech, I know you were impressed by the way he delivered it and more importantly, the words. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not always impressed by his speeches, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I mean, he does have that sort of flair for the dramatic that I find sometimes off-putting, but tonight he really sounded on point, and he had a number of messages that I think probably resonated with voters, and this sort of turned to more positive discourse, and I think that's quite appealing.
David, I'm always fascinated by the speeches leaders give, whether it's premier designates or prime ministers, whether it was Stephen Harper or tonight Justin Trudeau, and I imagine what it's like to write that speech and especially to have a second speech in the back pocket of the advisors in case it's a concession speech as opposed to a victory speech. What did you feel about what Justin Trudeau said tonight?
Well, I think he was the only one of the three leaders that had a victory speech prepared tonight. That was pretty obvious based upon the others. But his speech was conciliatory, generous, prime ministerial, and very much collegial in the sense of reaching out to the other party leaders, the other parties, and all Canadians. His famous line, "The Conservatives are not our enemies, they're our neighbors." That's a different approach, and it signals a different approach to politics in our country, Ian, and we'll see how long that can last.
There's so much cynicism about politics so many times. This seemed to be, some would suggest maybe a campaign of optimism, certainly a speech, I think, Aaron, of optimism.
Yeah, I mean, I heard those kinds of optimistic words, and it's quite in contrast, actually, to the campaign in general that we saw ran, not by the Liberals specifically, but definitely by the Conservatives. I mean, there is a sort of a language of politics of fear and protect our economy, and we need to fear terrorism and that sort of thing. And I think this is a bit of a reaction to that, you know, that perhaps these kind of wedge politics maybe don't work as well as we might have thought they could.
Much more to talk about. We'll be coming back to you a lot over the next hour. We'll also be checking in with our reporters who are live in Western Canada. If you were watching our special earlier, you know we spent a lot of time on Atlantic Canada because the polls closed first in Newfoundland and then in the Maritimes. We haven't had as much time to dig down into the results for Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia, and I assure you we're going to be doing that over the next hour or so. Let's begin by looking at the party standings tonight in the province of British Columbia. Like so many other regions in the country, it's an interesting story, and really no one